What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video on the channel, and today we're going to be doing an ultimate beginner's guide to Dead by Daylight. This video is going to be aimed at the survivor side of the game, but there are many parts of the video that will also apply to killer, so whether you want to learn the basics of survivor or killer, this is going to be the perfect video for you to watch. I would also recommend sending this video to a friend if you know someone who is new to Dead by Daylight. You could send them this video and it will really help them out and help them learn the basics of the game. I do also have a video which will give you tips and tricks on how to play against every single killer, and it will tell you their weaknesses. I'll leave a link to that video in the description down below. And also one last thing before we get started, I do post survivor build related videos twice per week, as well as other survivor tips and tricks. So if you do enjoy the video and would like to see more, then don't forget to subscribe for some more Dead by Daylight videos. There will also be timestamps in the description below, so if you would like to skip to a specific part in the video, you can do that. And with all that out of the way, let's get straight into the video. So Dead by Daylight can be a very complex game, and whether you're brand new to the game, just have a few hours, or even relatively experienced at the game and just want to make sure there's nothing that you're missing, this guide will have you covered and allow you to learn all the basics of Dead by Daylight. The very first thing that I'd advise you to do if you're brand new to the game is to complete the tutorial, which can be located in the Getting Started tab. Once you finish the first 2 games of the tutorial, you will then be able to play games against bots, which is going to be amazing for practicing ways to loop killers. Even if you are experienced at the game, this could definitely help you, especially if you struggle with chasers. Now, I know that tutorials can be boring, but this will definitely help you get started, and it doesn't take long to complete. Also, you will be awarded a lot of blood points with each level of the tutorial that you complete, and blood points are going to be needed to level up your survivor and help you gain perks. So each survivor can be leveled up from level 1 to a maximum of level 50. The way that you level up a survivor is through the blood web, and when you do get past your first few levels of the blood web, the entity will start to take items and perks from each blood web. You should always prioritize perks rather than items or offerings, as the entity will always start by taking a perk in the later stages of the blood web. As you level up your survivor, you will be able to unlock more perk slots until you can eventually use 4 different perks. You can also prestige your character to a maximum of 3rd prestige level 50, but I would strongly advise avoiding prestiging your characters if you are new to the game. The only benefit to prestiging your characters is that you unlock their default outfit with blood. 1st prestige will unlock the torso, 2nd prestige will unlock the legs, and 3rd prestige will unlock the head. It is also rumoured that you will get a slightly higher chance of finding higher rarity items in the blood web, but coming from someone who has prestiged many different survivors and killers, I can say that I haven't noticed any difference myself. Prestiging your characters will also make you lose all items, perks and add-ons that you currently have for that specific survivor, so I would strongly recommend against prestiging your characters, especially when you're starting the game. But if you do want to prestige your characters, make sure you have at least one survivor leveled up with perks on, so that you can use them to play as whilst you're leveling up your main survivor. As previously mentioned, blood points are what are used to level up your survivors by purchasing items, offerings and perks in the blood web. You can earn blood points by completing daily rituals, completing rift challenges, and also just by playing the game. Also, the cap to blood points is 1 million. So unlike killers, each survivor is pretty much the exact same, and the only real difference between survivors are the size and the sound they make when they are injured. Typically, male survivors are larger than female survivors, which means playing as a female survivor will give you a slightly better field of view, as they take up slightly less space on the screen. Also, some survivors may be slightly louder than others, and some survivors may be slightly taller or slightly shorter than others, but for the most part, all survivors are pretty much the same, so just use whichever one you like the most, or use whichever survivor has the teachable perks that you want. So each survivor has 3 unique teachable perks that can be unlocked on that specific survivor. The good news is that these teachable perks can be unlocked on different survivors as well. The way that you unlock the teachable perk, which means you will be able to get it on different survivors, is through the blood web. It is really easy to spot which perk is a teachable perk, as it will be orange instead of yellow, green or purple. Once you purchase a teachable perk from the blood web, you will now be able to find that perk in the blood web of all other survivors, and the orange teachable perks will appear in the blood web at level 30, level 35 and level 40 of every survivor. Prestiging your survivors won't affect your teachable perks. Once you have purchased the orange teachable perk in the blood web, that perk will then stay unlocked forever, meaning that you will always be able to find it in the blood web of different survivors. There are also a handful of non-teachable or neutral perks, such as spine chill and resilience. These perks are automatically unlocked for everyone, so you will instantly be able to find them in the blood web of all survivors. Definitely be careful and be selective of the teachable perks that you unlock. I'd recommend avoiding bad teachable perks, as you don't want them to clog up space in the blood web. For example, David King has 2 really good perks: We're Gonna Live Forever, which is great for earning more blood points, Dead Hard, which can be hard to use but it is one of the best exhaustion perks in the game, and also No Mither. The first 2 perks are really good perks that I'd recommend. However, No Mither makes you broken for the entirety of the trial, which means you'll be injured and unable to heal up, which is a huge downside, and you should definitely stay away from this perk, especially if you're a beginner. Instead, I'd only advise purchasing the teachable perks that you really want to unlock. As previously mentioned, once you unlock the teachable perk, you can't undo that, so I definitely recommend avoiding the bad teachable perks. So next up, we're going to go over some survivors and some perks that I recommend for beginners. The first thing that we're going to do is take a look at a handful of survivors that I think are good choices to level up first, as they have a lot of perks that will help you out a lot, especially if you are a beginner. Also, if my perks are a different color to yours, don't get confused by that. That is just a custom perk icon pack that I've installed. The first survivor that I recommend leveling up is Dwight. Dwight has 3 perks that are all relatively helpful. Bond allows you to see the aura of your teammates, Prove Thyself increases generator speed when multiple survivors are on the same generator, and Leader increases certain actions such as healing for your teammates whenever they are around you. If you are looking for 3 well-balanced perks, Dwight may be the best survivor to level up first. Jake has 2 perks that are pretty mediocre, however he has 1 perk which is insane and probably the strongest perk in the game. This perk is Iron Will and it allows you to be completely silent whilst injured, which is amazing, and just for this perk alone I would recommend leveling up Jake. Nia has an exhaustion perk called Balanced Landing, which allows you to gain a 3-second sprint burst when falling from distance. Exhaustion perks are some of the strongest survivor perks in the game, and for Balanced Landing alone I would recommend Nia. However, she does have 1 perk that I would recommend avoiding, which is Urban Evasion. This perk gives so many bad habits to newer players, so I highly recommend avoiding this perk. If you do choose Nia, she also has Streetwise, which is a relatively average perk. But if you really like the sound of Balanced Landing, you could go with Nia, but just keep in mind that her other 2 perks are pretty bad. Bill has 1 useless perk in Left Behind, but he also has 2 of the strongest perks in the game. Borrowed Time allows a teammate that you save from the hook to take a hit without going down. This perk is especially amazing for beginners as lots of newer killers will camp hooks. He also has Unbreakable, which allows you to fully recover from the dying state, which is really strong. So 2 amazing perks on Bill make him a survivor that I'd also recommend. The next survivor that I recommend is David King, and he has 2 really useful perks. The first perk is We're Gonna Live Forever, which is great for earning more blood points in games. He also has Dead Hard, which is a really strong exhaustion perk, but it is very difficult to use. David King also has no Mither, which, as mentioned before, this is a perk that you should definitely avoid. I'd recommend David if you want to earn more blood points or if you want to try and use Dead Hard. Next, I have 2 recommendations for survivors that are DLC. DLC can obviously be purchased with either real money, but since these 2 survivors are unlicensed, you can also purchase them with iridescent shards, which can be earned by just playing the game. The first DLC survivor that I recommend is Kate Denson. She has Dance With Me, which will help you lose killers. She also has Windows of Opportunity, which is an amazing perk, especially for beginners. Her next perk is Boil Over, which is a pretty average perk, but it could be helpful in a specific scenario. I definitely recommend Kate Denson if you are willing to purchase her with either real money or iridescent shards. The next DLC survivor that I recommend is Feng Min. Feng Min is a DLC character on PC, but I believe she is free on console. Her first perk is Technician, which will help you out if you are struggling with skill checks. She also has Lithe, which is an exhaustion perk that activates after you vault a window. Alert is also a really good information perk, and overall I definitely recommend Feng Min. If you are a huge fan of Resident Evil and are new to Dead by Daylight, obviously you will want to level up either Leon or Jill first. This also applies for any other franchises that you might be a fan of, for example Stranger Things. The game is all about having fun, so if there's a survivor that you want to level up because you like the look of them or you like their franchise, just go with them first and you can always get the perks later. Next, we're going to go over a few perks that I think you should avoid as a beginner. The first perk is Spine Chill. Spine Chill could maybe be a decent perk for beginners, but in most cases it will just make you paranoid that the killer's coming towards you when he isn't, and it also puts you in a bad habit of not looking around to see where the killer is. So for these 2 reasons, I would recommend avoiding Spine Chill. The next perk is Self-Care, and Self-Care is probably the biggest time waster in the game. If you do want to heal yourself, just bring a medkit instead, it will save you so much time. The next perk that I think you should avoid is Sprint Burst. Sprint Burst can be a strong exhaustion perk, but most beginners who use Sprint Burst will just walk around the map and it wastes so much time. Definitely avoid Sprint Burst, at least at the start. Urban Evasion is another perk that I think you should avoid. As previously mentioned before, Urban Evasion gives survivors a really bad habit. Similar to Sprint Burst, people who use Urban Evasion will just crouch around the map and just waste so much time. Definitely avoid this perk. The final perk that I think you should avoid is No Mither. No Mither is another perk that I've previously mentioned and it just puts you at a huge disadvantage. No Mither makes you injured all game, so for this reason you should definitely avoid it. Before we move on to the gameplay aspect of the game, we're going to briefly go over some items. So the first item, and probably the best item, is a medkit, and it will allow you to heal yourself. The amount of times that you can heal up will depend on the medkit that you use and also depend on the add-ons that you use on the medkit. This can also be affected by perks as well, so just keep that in mind. There are also toolboxes which used to be really strong, but now they've been nerfed and they're not quite as strong. They're still decent and you can also sabotage hooks with them. So yeah, toolboxes are also a decent item. There are also flashlights which can be really bad. If you're trying to get flashlight saves all the time and you're not working on generators, then that is actually really good for the killer. Flashlights can be really fun to use though, so if you don't care too much about gem pressure and too much about winning, they can be really fun to use and you can get some nice saves on your teammates as well. There are also keys. There's two different types of keys. There's a broken key and a skeleton key, and as well as a dull key. A skeleton key and a dull key will allow you to open the hatch with them, whilst a broken key doesn't do anything unless you have add-ons equipped to it. There are also various add-ons for the key that give you many different aura reading abilities, but overall the two keys that can open the hatch are very strong, and I believe it has been confirmed that they're getting a nerf soon, so by the time you're watching this video in the future, they may have already been nerfed. There's also a green map and a rainbow map. A rainbow map allows you to see the aura of various things across the map, and the green map needs add-ons to see things for the most part, apart from maybe a couple of generators that it will be able to track. There are also a couple of event items, for example an event medkit and event flashlight. Those are pretty much just the same as the normal medkit and the normal flashlight. There are also firecrackers that you can get, but you can only get these in events, and they're just a one-time use thing, so you use them and you can blind the killer with them, and they're also really hard to use as well. If you bring an item into the game, you will be able to keep it as long as you escape, although any add-ons that you bring will be used at the end of the game, whether or not you escape with that item. Also, there are offerings which can be used up. Once you bring an offering into the game, that offering will then be used, and it pretty much just does exactly what it says. For example, there will be certain offerings that will take you to a specific map, and there are also other offerings that will increase the blood points that you get for that one specific game. So now that we've gone over survivors, perks, items, and add-ons, let's get into the gameplay aspect of Dead by Daylight. 7 generators will spawn in every trial, and your objective as a team is to repair 5 generators. Once 5 generators have been completed, 2 exit gates will then be powered, and they can be opened, which will allow you and your teammates to escape. There is also a second way to escape, which is through the hatch. The downside to the hatch is that it will only open automatically when there's 1 survivor left in the trial. This can of course be changed by using keys. And at the time of recording this video, the hatch will only spawn in on the map when there are less survivors remaining than there are generators completed. For example, if 3 generators have been completed, then there can only be 2 survivors alive for the hatch to spawn in on the map. But again, it will only open automatically when there's 1 survivor left. Whilst repairing generators, you will also have to complete skill checks. If you hit a good skill check, then nothing happens. If you hit a great skill check, you will be awarded a very small progression bonus. And if you miss a skill check, the generator will explode, resulting in you losing some progress and also alerting the killer of your whereabouts. There are also other objectives on the map, such as totems. Dull totems don't really do anything for the most part, but if the totem is lit up, then this is what's known as a hex totem. A hex totem is a killer perk which can be taken away if you cleanse the totem. Just be aware of the killer perk Hex Haunted Ground, as this is a decoy which will expose you and your teammates after you cleanse the totem. You should still probably cleanse any hex totem you see, as the odds of it being haunted ground are very much against it, unless the killer is Spirit. The Spirit has Hex Haunted Ground as one of her 3 teachable perks, so if you see a hex totem on the Spirit and you know that she's not using Hex Ruin, there's a very high chance that that will be haunted ground, so I'd probably advise to leave it in that scenario. Although any other scenario, I would advise just cleansing a hex totem if you see one. There are also a few chests that will be scattered across the map that will have an item inside, and one of these chests will always spawn in the basement. The killer's job is to try and stop you from completing your objective by injuring and placing you on the hook. You have 2 health states, which means you will be able to take 1 hit, and then the second hit will put you into the dying state, where the killer can pick you up and place you on the hook. Keep in mind that there are certain killer powers and certain perks that will allow the killer to insta-down you with 1 hit. For the killer to kill you, he must place you on the hook 3 times in total, or if your timer on the hook goes below halfway, you will be immediately put into second phase, which means you will be dead on the next hook. And also, if your teammates completely fail you and leave you on the hook long enough for the full timer to run out, then you will just die in your first hook. We're not going to go over the killer powers and killer perks in this video. I will be doing that in a future video, and by the time you're watching this video, if you are watching it in the future, so be sure to check the channel and also check the tips and tricks playlist. Also, if you do want to know how to counter every single killer and know their weaknesses, as I mentioned in the intro, I will leave the link to that video in the description down below. So the next topic that we're going to cover is looping killers. The first thing that you need to keep in mind is that whenever you run, you will leave scratch marks behind, and this will help the killer track you down. Obviously, if you're in a chase, you do have to run, so the killer will always be able to see your scratch marks. Walking and crouching prevents you from leaving scratch marks, but please don't be that survivor that walks across the entire map out of fear of being found by the killer. Unless you are in the killer's terror radius, they usually won't be able to find you by using your scratch marks. Of course, there will be exceptions with this, for example, stealth killers and other killers with perks and add-ons. But as I just mentioned, the killer has what's known as a terror radius, which is a heartbeat noise that gets louder and louder the closer they get. When it comes to avoiding the killer, your best 2 methods of escaping them or wasting their time are pallets and windows. A finite amount of pallets will spawn on each map, so it is important not to waste them. Some pallets are of more value than others. Generally, the larger the loop, the better the pallet is, and if the killer has no way around the loop, this is referred to as a god pallet. It's referred to a god pallet because the killer can't mind game or double back around the pallet, and a killer is forced to break it for the most part. Again, this will change depending on the killer. For example, Nurse will be able to blink through the pallet, but a good example of a god pallet would be the pallet that spawns in the shack. As for windows, they will never go away and they can't be destroyed by the killer. which means they are much more efficient when it comes to being resourceful. There are 3 different vaults that you can get with the window. If you press the vault button on its own, you will get a slow vault, which won't alert the killer. You can get a medium vault by vaulting the window whilst also holding the sprint button, which will alert the killer. And you can also get a fast vault by having a run up to the window and vaulting it whilst also holding the sprint button. This will also alert the killer of your whereabouts, and whenever in chase, you want to try and get a fast vault whenever possible. The windows will also be blocked by the entity after you vault them 3 times in a chase, so as long as you count how many times that you vaulted it and plan ahead once it is blocked by the entity, you should be fine. There are also many different maps in Dead by Daylight, but most of them will spawn familiar tiles that spawn on many different maps. An example of this would be a TNL wall, and it can spawn on pretty much all outdoor maps. Indoor maps are much more difficult to loop because they are much more unpredictable and much more different to any other map. It will take lots of practice with lots of trial and error to become comfortable with looping killers, but with enough practice you will get better and better over time. So guys, that is going to be the end of the video. I think we've covered pretty much everything when it comes to the basics of Dead by Daylight, but feel free to add a comment below with anything else that you would like to add. I will also be doing more of these videos going forward, but it will be the occasional video as my main focus is staying on survivor build related videos. So guys, I hope that you found this video helpful. Thank you for watching, and as always, I will see you next time.